What does a duke look like when he's lost everything but his pride? And he's about to lose that too. Jessica Fairchild learned the answer at 9:30 on a rain-soaked October night when Nathaniel Hargrove appeared at her door. The same man who'd thrown her into poverty 2 years ago, now trembling and desperate. "They'll take the estate at dawn unless I'm married," he said, each word seeming to cost him something vital. "Every woman in England has refused me. You're the last one. And I know," his voice cracked, "I know I don't deserve to ask."
Hello everyone! Before we start, make sure to like and subscribe to the channel, like the video and share with loved ones, and tell me in the comments where you're watching from and what time it is there. That way YouTube will keep showing you stories just like this one. Now, let's begin.
The portraits were watching him. Nathaniel Hargrove, Duke of Bellhurst, stood in the portrait gallery where 12 generations of his ancestors stared down from gilded frames. Men with stern faces and inherited certainty, men who'd never known the taste of desperation. The solicitor's letter sat upon the marble mantel beside him. Its words burned into his mind, though he could no longer bear to look at the crisp legal script. Pursuant to the Hargrove Estate Clause of 1624, failure to marry before the hour of dawn on the date of scandal shall render all titles, properties, and holdings forfeit to the Crown. This clause, enacted to prevent dissolution of the family line through recklessness or moral turpitude, cannot be overturned by any court in England. Reckless, moral turpitude. The words were knives twisting in his chest. Nathaniel Hargrove had been neither. Careful, measured, dutiful to a fault. He'd lived his entire 34 years in service to this estate, to these portraits, to the weight of expectation that settled on a duke's shoulders like iron chains. And still, he stood here in the autumn of 1874, 6 hours from losing everything. His hands shook as he poured whiskey he had no intention of drinking. The crystal decanter felt foreign in his grip. Everything felt foreign now. 3 weeks ago, his cousin Julian had set his trap with the precision of a man who'd been planning it for years. Whispers in the right ears. Forged correspondence suggesting an affair with Lady Ashmont, a married woman of dubious reputation. Fabricated ledgers showing funds diverted from the estate's charitable trust. All lies. Every word. But Victorian society didn't require truth, only the appearance of scandal. And Julian had painted scandal in bold, indelible strokes across Nathaniel's name. The Duke of Bellhurst, caught in moral corruption. The newspapers had feasted on it like carrion birds. And the ancient clause, dormant for 2.5 centuries, buried in dusty legal documents, had awakened like some vengeful ghost. The first Duke of Bellhurst, paranoid about his line's continuity, had written it in 1624. Any heir who brought scandal upon the family must marry within 24 hours of the scandal's public emergence, or forfeit everything. It was absurd, medieval, but it was legally binding. Nathaniel had spent 3 weeks calling upon every eligible woman of his acquaintance. The daughters of earls, the sisters of barons, even the widows of lesser gentry. Women who might have been flattered by a duke's attention mere months ago. They'd all refused. No one wanted to tie themselves to a name synonymous with disgrace. No father would permit his daughter to marry into such obvious ruin. In the drawing rooms of London, Nathaniel Hargrove had become a cautionary tale whispered behind fans and teacups. He couldn't blame them. Victorian England was unforgiving. A woman who married him would share his social death. But still, the manor breathed around him. 400 years of stone and history, of children born in these rooms, of love and loss and stubborn continuity. His sister Violet had died in the East Wing nursery when she was 9 and he was 12, scarlet fever taking her in 3 terrible days. His mother had planted the rose garden before grief hollowed her out, and she faded like morning mist. His father had walked these corridors with the weight of duty pressing down on his shoulders, and then passed that crushing weight to Nathaniel with his final labored breath. "Don't let them erase us," his father had whispered in the winter of '69. And now, because of Julian's jealousy and Nathaniel's own failures, they would be erased. By noon tomorrow, the crown would take possession. The portraits would be sold. The roses would bloom for strangers. For centuries, ended by cowardice. The clock on the mantel, a French monstrosity his grandfather had brought back from Paris, struck 9. Rain lashed the windows in sheets. Autumn's fury unleashed across the Yorkshire moors. Nathaniel turned from the portraits, from those judging, unchanging faces, and made a decision born of pure desperation and something else, something that felt almost like penance. There was one woman, one person who had every reason to refuse him, every justification to laugh in his face and slam the door. But she was the only one left. And perhaps, in some twisted way, she was the only one who had ever deserved to be asked. He grabbed his coat and hat, left orders with his bewildered butler, and stepped out into the storm. 15 miles away, in modest lodgings above a milliner's shop in Thornfield Village, Jessica Fairchild was trying to convince herself she'd made peace with invisibility. The lace in her lap was impossibly fine, destined for some society lady's ball gown. A lady who would never know the woman who'd mended it, who'd spent 3 hours by candlelight making sure every thread was perfect. Jessica's eyes ached. Her fingers were cramped. But the work paid for her room and her modest meals, and it asked nothing of her except precision. Precision she could manage. It was trust that had proven impossible. Her room was small but clean, a narrow bed, a chair by the window, a washstand, and a small table where she took her solitary meals. Her canary, Milton, sang softly in his cage by the window, oblivious to the storm building outside. She'd named him after her favorite poet. Paradise Lost had been her companion through her mother's final consumptive months, those terrible days when every breath was a battle. Better to reign in hell than serve in heaven, she murmured to the bird, who cocked his yellow head as if considering the philosophy. Jessica set aside the lace and stretched her fingers, studying the modest room that had become her entire world. 2 years ago, she'd imagined something grander. Not wealth. She wasn't fool enough to dream of that, but perhaps a position of respect. A lady's companion in a good household. Perhaps, if she was very fortunate, a governess for children who actually wanted to learn. She'd had that, briefly, at Bellhurst Manor. The memory rose unbidden, unwelcome. The grand estate on the hill, the libraries filled with books in 6 languages, the Dowager Duchess's kind eyes as she'd hired Jessica to be her companion and assist with cataloging the family's art collection. Jessica had been 23, freshly arrived from 3 years of service in a London household, carrying references and hope in equal measure. Lady Helena Hargrove had been everything kind, elderly, sharp-witted, delighted to have someone who could read French and discuss Italian painting. For 3 months, Jessica had felt something like happiness. Then Julian Hargrove had decided she would be his entertainment. The Duke's cousin, charming and cruel in equal measure, with wandering hands and assumptions about women of Jessica's class, that they were available, pliable, grateful for attention from their betters. He'd cornered her in the storage room one October afternoon, pressed her against shelves of old ledgers, whispered things that made her skin crawl. She'd fought him off, slapped him hard enough to leave a mark, run directly to the Duke himself and reported what had happened, her voice shaking but clear. And Nathaniel Hargrove, the Duke of Bellhurst, the man who employed her, the aristocrat who supposedly valued honor, had looked at her with those cold blue eyes and said, "I find that difficult to believe, Miss Fairchild. Julian is family. Perhaps you misunderstood his intentions." A week later, she'd been dismissed for unsatisfactory work and inappropriate behavior. No references. No explanation to the Dowager Duchess, who'd been away visiting her sister in Bath. Just a cold dismissal and Julian's satisfied smirk as she'd packed her single trunk. Jessica had rebuilt herself here, in this small room, with her needlework and her translations of French novels for a London publisher who paid by the page. She didn't attend church, couldn't bear the pitying looks. She didn't socialize, couldn't risk more men like Julian. She existed in the careful, quiet way women without protection learned to exist in Victorian England. Invisibly, asking nothing, expecting less. Thunder rolled across the Yorkshire hills. The candle flames guttered. Milton chirped nervously. Jessica rose to close the window shutters when a knock sounded at her door. She froze. No one visited her. The milliner downstairs barely acknowledged her existence. The landlord came only on the first of the month for rent. The knock came again, harder, more urgent. Jessica's heart hammered. She crossed the small room, hand trembling as she reached for the latch. "Who's there?" No answer. Just another knock, almost desperate. She opened the door. And there, dripping rainwater onto the landing, coat plastered to his frame and dark hair hanging in wet strands across his forehead, stood Nathaniel Hargrove, Duke of Bellhurst. For a moment, neither of them could speak. Rain drummed against the building. Somewhere below, the milliner's shop sign creaked in the wind. Jessica's mind raced. Shock, confusion, a flash of old anger. His eyes met hers, and she saw something she'd never seen before in that aristocratic face. Raw, unmasked desperation. Then the Duke of Bellhurst said the last thing she ever expected to hear, his voice rough and breaking. "Miss Fairchild, forgive the intrusion. I need you to marry me. Tonight." Jessica stared at him, at the rain streaming down his face, at the way his hands shook. What if the person who destroyed your life appeared at your door, desperate and broken, asking for the one thing that could save them? Would you help them, or let justice take its course? Then, despite everything, despite the anger and the hurt and the 2 years of carefully rebuilt dignity, Jessica Fairchild did something she couldn't quite explain. She stepped aside and let him in. Jessica didn't offer him a chair. She stood by the door she'd just closed, arms crossed, watching water pool on her floor from his expensive coat. "Marriage," she said flatly. "To me, yes. Tonight, yes." Nathaniel's voice was hoarse, stripped of the aristocratic polish she remembered. He looked around her tiny room, taking in the mended lace, the single candle, the modest furniture that spoke of genteel poverty. His jaw tightened. "I know how this sounds." "Do you?" Jessica's anger, carefully buried for 2 years, began to surface. "Because it sounds like desperation. It sounds like you've exhausted every respectable option, and now you're scraping the bottom of society's barrel." He flinched. "That's not. Every woman in England refused you, you said." Her voice was sharp as glass. "How many did you ask, Your Grace? 20? 50? And when they all said no, you remembered the woman you destroyed. Convenient. Miss Fairchild, don't." She held up a hand. "Don't use my name like we're acquaintances. You call me a liar. You chose your cousin's word over mine when he—" Her voice cracked. She steadied it. "When he put his hands on me. You threw me out without references. Do you know what that means for a woman? No position. No prospects. I've been mending lace for pennies because no respectable house will hire me." Nathaniel stood there, dripping and broken, and said nothing. What could he say? The silence stretched. Rain hammered the window. Milton chirped softly, nervous. Then Nathaniel did something she didn't expect. He didn't defend himself, didn't make excuses. His shoulders sagged, and when he spoke, his voice was barely above a whisper. "You're right. About all of it." Jessica blinked. "I was a coward." He looked at her directly, those blue eyes no longer cold, but raw with something that looked like shame. "Julian told me you'd encouraged him, that you'd been inappropriate. And I believed him because believing you would have meant admitting my cousin was a predator. It would have meant choosing a woman I barely knew over family. And I—" He stopped, swallowed. "I took the coward's way." The admission hung in the air between them. "I've thought about that day every week for 2 years, Nathaniel continued. What I should have said, what I should have done. I told myself it was complicated, that I couldn't know the truth. But I did know. I saw your face. and I still chose wrong. Jessica's hands trembled. She clasped them together. Why should I believe this isn't just another convenience? More pretty words. Because I'm not offering you convenience. He reached into his coat pocket, pulled out a folded paper. This is my solicitor's draft. If you marry me tonight, I'll restore your reputation publicly. I'll testify that Julian assaulted you and I wrongfully dismissed you. I'll ruin him the way he's ruined me. And I'll settle £20,000 on you. Yours regardless of what happens to the estate. Jessica stared at the paper. £20,000. A fortune. Freedom. And if I refuse? Nathaniel's smile was bitter. Then by dawn, the crown takes Bellhurst. 400 years of legacy gone. And perhaps, he looked at her. Perhaps that's justice. The room went very quiet. Even the rain seemed to pause. Jessica moved to her small table, lit another candle with shaking hands. She poured 2 cups of weak tea from the pot she'd made earlier. Extended one to him. He took it like a drowning man accepting rope. She studied him over the rim of her cup. This Duke who'd destroyed her, now desperate enough to beg. 2 years ago, she'd have given anything to hear him admit fault. Now that he had, she didn't know what to feel. If I do this, she said slowly, you owe me more than money. You owe me honesty. No more aristocratic masks. No more choosing convenience over truth. I swear it. And you destroy Julian publicly. Not quietly. Not with gentlemen's agreements. I want the world to know what he did. You have my word. She set down her teacup, looked at this broken man who'd once seemed so untouchable, and felt something shift inside her chest. Not forgiveness. Not yet. But maybe the beginning of something else. Recognition, perhaps. They were both ruins. Jessica Fairchild extended her hand across the small table. Then let's go get married, Your Grace. The carriage ride was suffocating. Nathaniel had sent for his coach, a gleaming black monstrosity that looked absurd parked outside the milliner's shop. Jessica climbed in wearing her only decent dress, a dark blue wool that had seen better years, clutching a shawl against the cold. She felt like a child playing dress-up in a world she didn't belong to. The Duke sat across from her, rigid and silent. The space between them felt like an ocean. Where are we going? Jessica asked, though she wasn't sure she wanted to know. St. Michael's Parish. Father Raleigh owes my family a debt. My father funded the church's restoration 15 years ago. He'll marry us without banns. How convenient. The aristocracy always has its shortcuts. Nathaniel's jaw tightened, but he didn't respond. What could he say? She was right. The Yorkshire countryside rolled past in rain-blurred darkness. Jessica gripped her reticule so hard her knuckles went white. This was insane. Marrying a man she despised, binding herself legally to someone who'd already proven he couldn't be trusted. In Victorian England, marriage meant everything. A woman's property, her body, her entire existence absorbed into her husband's legal identity. She'd have no escape if this went wrong. We could stop, she said suddenly. Turn back. Find another way. Nathaniel looked at her, and for a moment, she thought he might agree. Then, there is no other way. Not for me. And what about me? What if I regret this? Then you'll be a very wealthy woman who regrets it. His voice was hollow. The settlement is yours regardless. You could leave tomorrow if you wished. Could I? Jessica leaned forward. Or would society say I abandoned my husband? Would they call me mercenary, grasping? A woman who married a duke for money and ran. He had no answer. They both knew how this would look. The carriage hit a rut. Jessica braced herself against the window. This is madness, she whispered. We'll both regret this. I already regret everything, Nathaniel said quietly. St. Michael's was a small stone church huddled against the moors, its windows glowing faintly in the darkness. Father Raleigh met them at the door, a thin, elderly man with kind eyes that grew increasingly troubled as Nathaniel explained. Your Grace, marriage is a sacred covenant before God, not a legal convenience. I'm aware, Father. Are you? The priest looked between them. The Duke in his expensive coat, the unknown woman in her threadbare dress. Because this feels like desperation, not devotion. Jessica felt her cheeks burn. Even the priest could see the truth. "Father Raleigh," she said, surprising herself with the steadiness in her voice. "Desperation can also be a choice. We're choosing this. Both of us." The priest studied her for a long moment, then sighed. "Very well, but I'll not have this be a mockery. You'll speak your vows properly and mean them, or you'll leave my church unwed." The ceremony was brief and awkward. No flowers, no guests, no music. Just 3 people standing before an altar while rain drummed the roof and candles flickered in the draught. Jessica's hands shook as she spoke the vows. To have and to hold. For better or worse. Till death us do part. The words felt like chains and wings at once. Nathaniel's voice cracked on "I do." Father Raleigh pronounced them man and wife with visible reluctance. "You may kiss the bride." They didn't. They stood there, 2 strangers bound by law and desperation, neither quite able to look at the other. The priest handed Nathaniel the marriage certificate. "May God have mercy on you both." Outside, the rain had intensified. Jessica climbed back into the carriage as the Duchess of Bellhurst, a title that felt like a costume she hadn't asked to wear. Nathaniel sat across from her, the certificate clutched in his hands like a lifeline. "What happens now?" Jessica asked, her voice small. He stared out at the darkness. "I don't know." Bellhurst Manor loomed out of the darkness like something from a Gothic novel. All stone towers and leaded windows, ancient and imposing. Jessica had been here before, of course, but arriving as the Duchess felt different. Wrong somehow. Like wearing someone else's skin. The butler, Harrison, she remembered, opened the door with eyes that betrayed nothing, though she saw his gaze flicker over her worn dress with barely concealed shock. "Your Grace. Your Grace." The second title came with a pause that spoke volumes. "Mrs. Harrison will prepare the Duchess's chambers," Nathaniel said, his voice clipped and formal, the aristocratic mask sliding back into place now that they were home. "No." Jessica's voice was sharper than she intended. Every head turned. "I mean, that's not necessary. I won't be staying long. You'll stay until dawn at minimum." Nathaniel's tone brooked no argument. "The creditors arrive at sunrise. They'll need to see evidence of legitimacy. Evidence. As if their marriage was a stage play requiring convincing props." "The Blue Room, then," Jessica said quietly, "if it's still available." It was the small guest room where she'd stayed during her previous employment, modest, tucked away in the East Wing. Not the Grand Duchess's chambers with their centuries of history and expectation. Nathaniel looked like he might argue, then nodded. "As you wish." But when Jessica reached the Blue Room 20 minutes later, a maid informed her apologetically that the heating had failed, some problem with the flue that wouldn't be fixed until morning. The room was frigid, the kind of bone-deep cold that old stone buildings held like grudges. "The library fire is still burning, Your Grace," the maid offered. "His Grace often works there through the night." So Jessica found herself back downstairs, hovering at the library door like an uncertain ghost. Through the gap, she could see Nathaniel standing by the fire, staring into the flames with the blank expression of someone who'd stopped feeling anything at all. She knocked softly. He turned, surprise flickering across his face. "I thought you'd retired." "The Blue Room is uninhabitable," your maid suggested. She gestured vaguely at the warm room. "Of course. Please." He moved to the sideboard, poured brandy into 2 crystal glasses without asking if she wanted any. His hands were steadier now, but she noticed he gripped the decanter too tightly. Jessica accepted the glass and settled into a chair by the fire, careful to maintain proper distance. The silence stretched between them, heavy with things neither knew how to say. "Thank you," Nathaniel said finally, "for doing this. Don't thank me yet. We're not through dawn." He almost smiled. "Almost. Fair enough." Jessica sipped the brandy. It burned, but warmly. She studied the library, remembering the hours she'd spent here cataloging books for the Dowager Duchess. "I loved this room," she said without thinking. "Your grandmother had exquisite taste." "She died 6 months ago," Nathaniel said quietly. "While visiting Bath. I wrote to inform you, but I wasn't sure if the letter would reach you." Jessica's throat tightened. Lady Helena had been kind to her. "I'm sorry. She was a remarkable woman. She asked about you." At the end, Nathaniel stared into his glass. "Wanted to know why you'd left so suddenly. I told her you'd found a better position." "You lied to a dying woman?" "I lied to everyone, including myself." He set down his glass, ran a hand through his still damp hair. "It's rather become my specialty." The fire crackled. Rain continued its assault on the windows. Jessica noticed, for the first time, a small frame tucked behind a stack of books on the mantel. A child's drawing in faded pencil, carefully preserved under glass. "What's that?" she asked. Nathaniel followed her gaze. His entire body stiffened. For a moment, she thought he wouldn't answer. Then, "My sister drew it. Violet. She was 9. Was scarlet fever. 1858. She died in 3 days." His voice was flat, the words clearly rehearsed through years of repetition to numb their edge. "I was 12. I held her hand while she burned with fever and couldn't do anything except watch her slip away." Jessica's anger, so carefully maintained, cracked slightly. "I'm sorry. Everyone's sorry. Sorry doesn't bring them back." He paused, then seemed to hear his own bitterness. "Forgive me. That was unkind." It was honest. Jessica set down her glass and stood, moving closer to examine the drawing. It showed a grand house. This house, with 2 stick figures holding hands in the garden. A girl and a taller boy. "She loved you. I failed her, just like I failed you." Nathaniel's voice broke on the last word. "I'm rather accomplished at failing people." Jessica turned to look at him. Really look at him. Not the Duke who'd dismissed her, but the man standing here in this library surrounded by ghosts and regrets. She saw the 12-year-old boy who'd watched his sister die, the son trying to please a demanding father, the aristocrat trapped in expectations he never chose. "I lost my mother 3 years ago," she heard herself say. "Consumption. She worked herself to death as a seamstress after my father abandoned us. She died in a charity ward because I couldn't afford better care." Nathaniel's eyes met hers. "Jessica. Miss Fairchild," she corrected automatically, then stopped. "Or, I suppose it's your grace now, isn't it? How absurd." "It's all absurd." And then, unexpectedly, he laughed, a short, broken sound. "A duke and a dismissed companion, married to save an estate neither of us particularly wants. What a gothic melodrama we've become." Despite herself, Jessica felt her lips twitch. "We're missing the mysterious locked room and the madwoman in the attic. Give it time. The night's not over." And there, in the firelight, surrounded by books and ghosts and the wreckage of both their lives, something shifted. Not forgiveness. That would take far more than brandy and shared grief. But recognition, perhaps. Understanding. They were both ruins trying to convince the world they were still standing. The clock struck 2 in the morning. They'd moved closer to the fire, the brandy bottle now half empty between them. Jessica's shoes sat discarded by her chair, a small rebellion against propriety that felt significant in this house of rigid expectations. "Tell me about Julian," she said, the brandy making her bold. "The truth this time, not the version you told yourself to sleep at night." Nathaniel was quiet for so long she thought he wouldn't answer. Then he leaned forward, elbows on his knees, staring into the flames. "We grew up together. He's 2 years younger, the second son of my father's younger brother. His father died when Julian was 8, so my father took them in. Julian and his mother lived here, in the West Wing." He paused. "My father. He wasn't unkind to Julian, but he made the distinction clear. Julian was family, but he wasn't heir. Wasn't Duke. Would never be Duke. That must have been difficult for a child. It poisoned him." Nathaniel's voice was hollow. "Every birthday, Every Christmas, every family gathering, Julian watched me receive what he thought should have been his. The tutors paid more attention to me. The servants deferred to me. When we rode together, I got the better horse. When we studied, my achievements mattered more. Jessica listened, seeing the shape of it now. He hated you. He loved me. And hated me. Both at once. Nathaniel looked at her. When we were boys, he was my closest friend. My brother in everything but name. Then we turned 15, and my father sat me down to explain my future, the duties, the responsibilities, the weight of the title. Julian sat outside the study door and heard every word. Heard my father say I would be Duke, and Julian would be provided for. Like a poor relation. So he decided to destroy you. Not immediately. That came later. Nathaniel stood, moved restlessly to the window. Rain still battered the glass. He started small. Rumors about me at university. A forged letter here, a twisted story there. Nothing I could prove, but enough to make people question. Then, 2 years ago, you arrived. Jessica's chest tightened. I was another weapon. You were an opportunity. His voice was rough. Julian saw how my grandmother doted on you. How you were smart and capable and everything this house needed. And he couldn't bear it. Another person who might matter to this family, who wasn't him. So Nathaniel's hands curled into fists. He told me you'd been flirting with him. That you'd initiated everything. That women of your class often tried to leverage such situations for money or position. And you believed him. Jessica's voice was cold. I wanted to believe him. Because the alternative was admitting my cousin, my brother in all but blood, was a predator. That I'd brought someone into my home and failed to protect them. He turned to face her. I chose comfort over courage. And I've regretted it every day since. The admission hung between them, raw and painful. Jessica set down her glass with trembling hands. Do you know what happened after you dismissed me? I can imagine. No, you can't. She stood, anger and brandy making her voice shake. I had no references, no position. No one would hire me because word spread. The Duke of Bellhurst's household had dismissed a companion for inappropriate behavior. Do you know what that means in polite society? It means I was damaged goods. Ruined. Nathaniel's face had gone pale. I took a room above a milliner's shop. I mended lace until my fingers bled. I translated French novels for a publisher who paid me a penny per page. I existed, Your Grace, but I didn't live. Because you chose your cousin's lie over my truth. Jessica. And the worst part. Her voice broke. The worst part was that I understood. I knew how the world worked. I knew a duke couldn't take a nobody's word over family. I knew my place. She laughed bitterly. My mother always said, pride without principle is poison. You held on to your pride, your family's reputation, your comfortable illusions. And it poisoned everything. Nathaniel stood frozen, every word landing like a blow. You're right. About all of it. I know I'm right. The question is, do you? Really? Or is this just more performance? The repentant duke playing his part until dawn, when the creditors leave and you can go back to being comfortable? There's nothing comfortable left. His voice was barely a whisper. Julian didn't just destroy my reputation. He destroyed my illusions. Every assumption I had about family, about loyalty, about who I was, it's all ash now. And standing here, looking at you, seeing what my cowardice cost. He stopped, swallowed hard. If I could undo it, I would. But I can't. All I can do is make sure he never hurts anyone again. Jessica stared at him. This broken duke who'd finally run out of places to hide, and felt something inside her chest crack open. Not forgiveness. Not yet. But maybe the beginning of belief. Then you'd better mean it, she said quietly. Because when dawn comes, I'm holding you to every promise. I know. The clock struck 2:30. Outside, the storm began to ease. And in the library of Bellhurst Manor, 2 wounded souls sat in silence, bound by marriage and something else, something fragile and unnamed, but undeniably real. By 4 in the morning, Exhaustion had softened the sharp edges between them. The brandy was gone, replaced by tea that Jessica had insisted on making herself. Scandalized the kitchen made by invading the servant's domain in the middle of the night, her new title meaning nothing in the face of her need to do something with her hands. Now they sat closer than before, propriety abandoned somewhere around the third cup of tea. Nathaniel had removed his jacket, rolled up his shirt sleeves. Jessica had unpinned her hair. It fell in dark waves around her shoulders, and she caught him looking more than once. "What?" she asked. "I never saw you like this before. You were always so proper." "I was a lady's companion in a duke's household. Proper was survival." She tucked a strand behind her ear. "Though your grandmother once caught me singing while cataloging books. I thought she'd dismiss me on the spot." "What did she do?" Jessica smiled at the memory. She asked what song it was. When I told her it was a hymn my mother used to sing, she sat down and asked me to teach it to her. We spent the entire afternoon singing instead of working. Her smile faded. "I missed her. After I left, I missed her terribly. She would have fought for you if she'd known the truth." Nathaniel stared into his teacup. "She never forgave my father for being cold. Used to tell me, 'Nathaniel, dear boy, a title is just a word. It's what you do with your humanity that matters.' Wise woman." I didn't listen. He set down his cup. "I was too busy trying to be what everyone expected. The perfect duke. The dutiful heir. I performed the role so well I forgot there was supposed to be a person underneath." Jessica studied him. This man who'd been raised as an institution rather than a human being. "When did you last do something just because you wanted to? Not because duty demanded it?" He looked genuinely puzzled by the question. "I don't know. Nothing? Not a single impulsive, selfish, perfectly human thing. I hid in this library as a boy," he said slowly. "My father would summon me for lessons on estate management or proper deportment, and I'd hide behind the philosophy section, reading poetry instead. Wordsworth, mostly. Keats when I was feeling particularly rebellious." The Duke of Bellhurst read poetry. Jessica couldn't help but smile. How scandalous. "I was 12 and desperately wanted to be anyone else." He returned her smile, the first genuine one she'd seen from him. "What about you? What did young Jessica Fairchild dream of being?" "A bird," she said immediately, then laughed at his expression. "I was 7. My father had just left. My mother was working constantly. I used to watch sparrows outside our window and think how lovely it must be to just fly away from everything. Hence Milton. Hence Milton." She glanced at the window, where dawn was still hours away. "Though I suppose I did fly in a way. All the way to England. Didn't solve anything. But at least the landscape was different." "Do you miss America?" "I miss who I was there. Before grief. Before." She gestured vaguely. All this. They fell into comfortable silence. The fire crackled. Rain had become a gentle patter rather than assault. "Tell me something true," Nathaniel said quietly. "Something you've never told anyone." Jessica considered. The brandy and exhaustion had stripped away her usual caution. "Sometimes I'm angry at my mother for dying, for leaving me alone. I know it's irrational. She didn't choose it, but I'm furious at her anyway. And then I feel guilty for being angry, and the guilt makes me angrier. And..." She stopped. "That's rather pathetic, isn't it?" "No." His voice was soft. "It's human." She looked at him. "Your turn. Something true." Nathaniel was quiet for a long moment. Then, "I'm terrified I'm exactly like my father. Cold. Distant. Choosing duty over people. I've spent my whole life trying not to be him. And still, when it mattered, I made the exact choices he would have made." "But you're here now," Jessica said. "Admitting it. That's different. Is it enough? I don't know yet." The honesty hung between them, fragile but real. When someone shows you who they really are beneath the title and the masks, the fears, the failures, the humanity, do you believe them? Or do you protect yourself from being hurt again? Nathaniel reached across the space between them. Not touching, but close. "Thank you. For tonight. For listening. For not running." Jessica looked at his hand, so close to hers, yet waiting. She thought of all the reasons to pull away, to protect herself. Then she thought of her mother singing hymns while her fingers bled from sewing, of choosing joy despite everything. She took his hand, and neither of them let go. They were still holding hands when the library door slammed open. Jessica jerked back, heart hammering. Nathaniel rose instantly, positioning himself between her and the intruder, an instinct that surprised them both. Julian Hargrove stood in the doorway, swaying slightly, reeking of whiskey and malice. His cravat was undone, his coat rumpled, but his eyes were sharp and focused with the clarity of long-nursed hatred. Well, well. His voice dripped venom. The happy couple. How touching. Get out, Julian. Nathaniel's voice was ice. From my own home? Oh, cousin, I think not. Julian sauntered in, making a show of examining the room. Though I suppose it's not quite my home yet, is it? You've bought yourself a reprieve. Married in the dead of night to your— what shall we call her? Your charity case? Jessica stood, chin raised despite the fear coursing through her. I'm his wife. His wife. Julian laughed, a cruel, brittle sound. Is that what we're calling it? A disgraced companion, dismissed for throwing herself at me, suddenly elevated to Duchess. Tell me, Miss Fairchild, what did you have to promise him? What did you have to do to secure such a remarkable promotion? That's enough. Nathaniel stepped forward, fury radiating from him. Is it? Julian's smile was vicious. Because I'm fascinated by this sudden romance. You, who wouldn't touch her with a 10-foot pole 2 years ago, now so desperate you'll marry her to save your precious estate. And she, poor thing, so hungry for status she'll overlook the fact that you destroyed her life. You destroyed her life, Nathaniel said, voice shaking with rage. You assaulted her. You lied about her. And I was fool enough to believe you. Because you wanted to believe me. Julian moved closer, predatory. Because believing her would have meant admitting your perfect family was rotten. Your precious Hargrove honor, built on lies and pretense. I did you a favor, cousin. I showed you the truth. The truth. Nathaniel's hands curled into fists. The truth is you're a coward who preys on vulnerable women. Who fabricates scandals because you can't stand that you'll never be Duke. Julian's face twisted with sudden rage. I should have been Duke. My father was the better man, everyone knew it. But because of an accident of birth, because he was born second, I'm relegated to scraps while you inherit everything. So you destroyed me. Forged documents. Spread lies. All because of jealousy. Justice. Julian spat. I simply revealed what you are, a cold, arrogant bastard who cares more about his precious legacy than actual people. This marriage proves it. She's not a wife, she's a legal loophole. A convenient solution to an inconvenient problem. He turned to Jessica, eyes glittering with malicious satisfaction. You think he cares about you? You think tonight meant something? He's using you, Miss Fairchild, just as he used you before. You're a shield, a human document to wave at creditors. And when this is over, when the estate is secure, he'll tuck you away in some corner of this moldering pile and forget you exist. The words hit like physical blows. Jessica felt her carefully rebuilt walls slamming back into place. Every instinct screaming that Julian was right, that she'd been a fool to trust, to soften, to believe. She looked at Nathaniel. Is that true? What? No. Are you using me? Jessica, you can't possibly believe. Answer the question. Her voice was steady despite the storm inside her. Am I just convenient? Just a solution to your problem? Nathaniel hesitated. 1 second. Maybe 2. But it was enough. Jessica saw it in his face. The flicker of calculation, the aristocratic instinct to protect himself first. He was thinking about how to phrase the answer, how to manage her reaction, how to navigate this moment with minimal damage. He was performing. Still, I see. Her voice went cold, distant. All the warmth from hours of shared confessions evaporating like morning mist. I should have known. Jessica, wait. Don't. She held up a hand. Don't insult me with more pretty words. Julian's right. I'm a legal document. A signature in a parish register. Congratulations, Your Grace. You've secured your inheritance. She walked toward the door, past Julian's triumphant smile, past everything. Where are you going? Nathaniel's voice cracked. Jessica stopped at the threshold but didn't turn around. Somewhere I don't have to wonder if I'm human or just useful. She walked out into the pre-dawn darkness. Behind her, she heard Julian's laughter echo through the halls of Bellhurst Manor. And Nathaniel said nothing at all. Nathaniel stood frozen in the library, Julian's laughter ringing in his ears like a curse. Well done, cousin. Julian's voice was thick with satisfaction. You've managed to fail yet another woman. It's almost impressive. Something inside Nathaniel snapped. He turned and grabbed Julian by his rumpled coat, slamming him against the bookshelf hard enough to rattle the volumes. Get out, or what? You'll hit me? How very ungentlemanly. I don't care. Nathaniel's voice was raw, stripped of every aristocratic pretense. I don't care about being a gentleman. I don't care about propriety. I don't care about any of it anymore. You've taken everything else. You're not taking this. Julian's eyes widened, perhaps the first time he'd ever seen genuine fury in his cousin's face. If you're not out of this house in 5 minutes, I'll have the constables remove you. And then I'll do what I should have done 2 years ago. I'll tell everyone exactly what you are. Every club, every drawing room, every corner of society will know you're a predator and a liar. You have no proof. I have her testimony, and mine, and I don't need more. Nathaniel released him roughly. Dawn is coming, Julian. The estate is saved. Your plan failed. Now leave before I forget we're related. For once, Julian had nothing clever to say. He straightened his coat, tried to summon his usual sneer, but it faltered. He left without another word, and Nathaniel heard the front door slam moments later. The library was suddenly, devastatingly quiet. Nathaniel sank into the chair Jessica had occupied, still warm from her presence. He could smell the faint scent of lavender from her hair, could see her teacup, still half full, sitting on the table between them. He'd hesitated. One crucial moment when she'd needed him to be certain, and he'd hesitated. Not because he was using her, God, not that, but because some deep, trained instinct had kicked in. The Duke's instinct. Calculate, measure, protect yourself first. The very instinct that had made him fail her 2 years ago. Julian was gone. The estate was saved. In 2 hours, the creditors would arrive, see the marriage certificate, and leave. Everything Nathaniel had fought for tonight was secured, and it meant nothing. He thought about the past 6 hours. Jessica's hand in his. Her voice saying, "You're here now." The way she'd looked at him when he'd confessed his fears, not with judgment, but with understanding. The fragile, terrifying possibility that maybe he could be more than just a title, more than just duty and performance. She'd given him that, and he destroyed it with one moment of cowardice. He could let her go, keep the marriage on paper, live separate lives as so many aristocratic couples did. She'd have her settlement, her restored reputation. He'd have his estate. Everyone would get what they'd bargained for. Except he didn't want what he'd bargained for anymore. He wanted her. Nathaniel found her in the garden, standing among his mother's rose bushes as the first hint of dawn touched the eastern sky. She'd wrapped herself in her shawl, but she was shivering, from cold or emotion, he couldn't tell. "Don't," she said without turning. "Whatever you've come to say, don't." I hesitated. His voice was rough. "When you asked if I was using you, I hesitated. And you deserved better than that. I know what I deserve. That's why I'm leaving. I hesitated because I'm a coward." He moved closer, not touching but close enough that she could feel his presence. "Because 34 years of training told me to think before I spoke. To calculate. To protect myself. And for one terrible second, that instinct was stronger than the truth." "What truth?" Her voice was bitter. "That you're not convenient. You're not useful. You're not a legal document or a solution to my problems." He moved around to face her, and she saw his eyes were wet. You're the first person in my entire life who's made me want to be human instead of Duke. Who's made me remember there's supposed to be a person under all this performance." Jessica shook her head. "Pretty words again. Then let me prove it with ugly ones." He dropped to his knees in the damp grass, ruining his trousers, destroying his dignity, every inch the opposite of a proper Duke. "I'm asking you to stay. Not for the estate. Not to satisfy the creditors. Not because you're convenient. I'm asking you to stay because these past 6 hours have been the only time I've felt like myself in years. Because you're brave enough to be angry, honest enough to show your wounds, and somehow still kind enough to hold my hand when I didn't deserve it." Tears spilled down Jessica's cheeks. "That's not enough, Nathaniel. I know." His voice broke on her name. "But it's the truth, and I'll spend every day proving it if you'll let me. Not as the Duke to his convenient Duchess, but as a man asking a woman, begging her, to give him a chance to be worthy of her." The sky was lightening. Dawn was coming. In less than an hour, creditors would arrive. Society would judge. The world would have its opinions about the Duke and his midnight bride. And Jessica Fairchild stood at the crossroads of the rest of her life. Nathaniel stood frozen in the library, Julian's laughter ringing in his ears like a curse. "Well done, cousin." Julian's voice was thick with satisfaction. "You've managed to fail yet another woman. It's almost impressive." Something inside Nathaniel snapped. He turned and grabbed Julian by his rumpled coat, slamming him against the bookshelf hard enough to rattle the volumes. "Get out, or what? You'll hit me? How very ungentlemanly." "I don't care." Nathaniel's voice was raw, stripped of every aristocratic pretense. "I don't care about being a gentleman. I don't care about propriety. I don't care about any of it anymore. You've taken everything else. You're not taking this." Julian's eyes widened, perhaps the first time he'd ever seen genuine fury in his cousin's face. "If you're not out of this house in 5 minutes, I'll have the constables remove you. And then I'll do what I should have done 2 years ago. I'll tell everyone exactly what you are. Every club, every drawing room, every corner of society will know you're a predator and a liar. You have no proof. I have her testimony. And mine. And I don't need more." Nathaniel released him roughly. "Dawn is coming, Julian. The estate is saved. Your plan failed. Now leave before I forget we're related." For once, Julian had nothing clever to say. He straightened his coat, tried to summon his usual sneer, but it faltered. He left without another word, and Nathaniel heard the front door slam moments later. The library was suddenly, devastatingly quiet. Nathaniel sank into the chair Jessica had occupied, still warm from her presence. He could smell the faint scent of lavender from her hair, could see her teacup, still half full, sitting on the table between them. He'd hesitated. One crucial moment when she'd needed him to be certain, and he'd hesitated. Not because he was using her. God, not that. But because some deep, trained instinct had kicked in. The Duke's instinct. Calculate, measure, protect yourself first. The very instinct that had made him fail her 2 years ago. Julian was gone. The estate was saved. In 2 hours, the creditors would arrive, see the marriage certificate, and leave. Everything Nathaniel had fought for tonight was secured. And it meant nothing. He thought about the past 6 hours. Jessica's hand in his. Her voice saying, "You're here now." The way she'd looked at him when he'd confessed his fears, not with judgment, but with understanding. The fragile, terrifying possibility that maybe he could be more than just a title, more than just duty and performance. She'd given him that, and he destroyed it with one moment of cowardice. He could let her go, keep the marriage on paper, live separate lives as so many aristocratic couples did. She'd have her settlement, her restored reputation. He'd have his estate. Everyone would get what they'd bargained for. Except he didn't want what he'd bargained for anymore. He wanted her. Nathaniel found her in the garden, standing among his mother's rose bushes as the first hint of dawn touched the eastern sky. She'd wrapped herself in her shawl, but she was shivering. From cold or emotion, he couldn't tell. "Don't," she said without turning. Whatever you've come to say, don't. I hesitated. His voice was rough. When you asked if I was using you, I hesitated. And you deserved better than that. I know what I deserve. That's why I'm leaving. I hesitated because I'm a coward. He moved closer, not touching but close enough that she could feel his presence. Because 34 years of training told me to think before I spoke. To calculate. To protect myself. And for one terrible second, that instinct was stronger than the truth. What truth? Her voice was bitter. That you're not convenient. You're not useful. You're not a legal document or a solution to my problems. He moved around to face her, and she saw his eyes were wet. You're the first person in my entire life who's made me want to be human instead of Duke. Who's made me remember there's supposed to be a person under all this performance. Jessica shook her head. Pretty words again. Then let me prove it with ugly ones. He dropped to his knees in the damp grass, ruining his trousers, destroying his dignity, every inch the opposite of a proper Duke. I'm asking you to stay. Not for the estate. Not to satisfy the creditors. Not because you're convenient. I'm asking you to stay because these past 6 hours have been the only time I've felt like myself in years. Because you're brave enough to be angry, honest enough to show your wounds, and somehow still kind enough to hold my hand when I didn't deserve it. Tears spilled down Jessica's cheeks. That's not enough, Nathaniel. I know. His voice broke on her name. But it's the truth. And I'll spend every day proving it if you'll let me. Not as the Duke to his convenient Duchess, but as a man asking a woman, begging her, to give him a chance to be worthy of her. The sky was lightening. Dawn was coming. In less than an hour, creditors would arrive. Society would judge. The world would have its opinions about the Duke and his midnight bride. And Jessica Fairchild stood at the crossroads of the rest of her life. Jessica looked down at Nathaniel Hargrove, the Duke of Bellhurst, kneeling in the mud among his dead mother's roses, and felt the last of her walls begin to crumble. This wasn't performance. This was surrender. She thought of her mother, working herself to death with a smile on her face, always choosing hope over bitterness, love over safety. Jessica, my darling, she used to say, the world will give you 1,000 reasons to close your heart. Don't let it win. Jessica had spent 2 years letting it win. 2 years hiding, protecting herself, surviving but not living. She was so tired of surviving. If I stay, she said slowly, watching him tremble, we do this honestly. No more masks. No more performance for society or for each other. When you're afraid, you tell me. When I'm angry, I tell you. We choose truth even when it's ugly. Yes. His voice was hoarse with hope. And you keep your promise about Julian. You destroy him publicly. I want society to know what he did, not for revenge, but so he never does it to anyone else. You have my word. My real word. Not the Duke's word, mine. She looked at him, this broken, honest man who'd finally run out of places to hide, and made her choice. Jessica extended her hand. Then get up, Nathaniel. You're ruining your trousers. He took her hand and rose. And this time when he pulled her close, she didn't resist. They stood in the garden as dawn painted the sky pink and gold. 2 wounded people choosing each other despite every reason not to. I'm still angry with you, she whispered against his chest. I know. It'll take time. To trust you. To believe this is real. I know. He pressed his lips to her hair. I'll wait. However long it takes. The first rays of sunlight broke over Bellhurst Manor. Church bells rang in the distance, marking 6 o'clock. The creditors will be here soon, Jessica said. Let them come. Nathaniel took her face in his hands, looking at her like she was something precious. Let all of them come. The creditors, society, Julian, everyone who wants to judge us. We'll face them together. At 6:30, 3 grim-faced men in black coats arrived at Bellhurst's main entrance. Harrison showed them to the drawing room where Nathaniel waited, Jessica standing beside him. Not behind, beside. Your Grace. The lead creditor's tone was skeptical. We've come to verify. My marriage. Nathaniel handed him the certificate from St. Michael's Parish. Legally performed last night before witnesses. My wife, Jessica, Duchess of Bellhurst. The men examined the document with clear disappointment. They'd hoped to seize a duke's estate. Instead, they'd be leaving empty-handed. This appears to be in order, the lead creditor said reluctantly. The Hargrove clause has been satisfied. The estate remains yours, Your Grace. After they left, Jessica exhaled shakily. It's done. No. Nathaniel turned to her. It's just beginning. The weeks that followed were not easy. Society buzzed with gossip about the Duke's midnight marriage to a nobody. Julian contested the marriage's validity and was publicly destroyed when Nathaniel testified before the magistrate about his cousin's assault on Jessica and his own cowardice in dismissing her. The scandal was enormous, but this time, the truth won. Jessica moved into the Duchess's chambers, but kept her modest room in the East Wing for days when she needed solitude. They negotiated their marriage like diplomats, learning each other's wounds and hopes and fears. Some days were hard. Some days Jessica's anger flared and Nathaniel's old instincts surfaced. But they promised honesty, and they kept that promise even when it hurt. Especially when it hurt. 3 months after their midnight wedding, Jessica found Nathaniel in the library, their library now, reading Keats by firelight. "May I join you?" she asked. He smiled and held out his hand. She took it and settled beside him, her head on his shoulder. "Are you happy?" he asked quietly. Jessica considered. Happiness felt like too simple a word for what she felt. This complicated, messy, beautiful thing they were building together. "I'm choosing to be. Every day. That's all I could ever ask." Outside, snow began to fall on Bellhurst Manor. Inside, a duke and his duchess sat by the fire, reading poetry and learning what it meant to be human. The legacy was no longer just land and titles and portraits in gilded frames. The legacy was this: 2 people who chose truth over comfort, vulnerability over safety, and love, messy, imperfect, honest love, over everything else. If you could rewrite your own story, choose courage over comfort, honesty over safety, what would your ending look like? Tell us in the comments below. Sometimes the greatest inheritance isn't what we're given, but what we choose to become. Sometimes the bravest thing we can do is let someone see us, truly see us, broken pieces and all. And sometimes, in the darkest hour before dawn, mercy looks exactly like justice. If this story moved you, if you believe in second chances and the courage it takes to be vulnerable, subscribe for more tales of redemption, love, and the beautiful mess of being human. Because every one of us is just one choice away from rewriting our ending. Choose wisely. Choose bravely. Choose love.
If you enjoyed this story, we appreciate you a whole lot and look forward to connecting with you as we build a community on this channel. Every day, we will put out more stories, so we need your support. Help us by liking, sharing, and subscribing to our channel if you haven't already. You won't miss any new exciting videos. Check out the next video. You'll love it!